We're back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It's Saturday. We're into the weekend. And on Saturdays, as so often the case, we have our regular guest, Ed. And Ed, I'm glad you're here with us. I need an older man to give us some reason and some understanding about all the bullshit that's going on. Ed, thanks for coming in.
You bet. Yeah. Well, I got my shovel and I'm ready to dig in.
You know what I enjoy most about having you on, Ed? You're the
What's
only
that?
you're the only person pretty much that I can say, well, here's an older guy I can look up to
Yeah,
because I'm older
that's
than
true.
everybody fucking else. This is
Yeah.
one chance to get an old guy in here and get some insight from somebody with experience.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of like Gandalf, I guess, if you're into the Lord of the Rings. I've been around a while.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
have a pointy hat, but still, I could get one
You
if
got
you'd
that
like.
stupid paper crown, is what you
Well,
got.
I got that. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I can wear that too.
So,
See, that's an outsider art crown. Is what we call that. You see.
yeah. Yeah. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Well, all that's been going on, have you been standing on a ledge someplace? I know I get a lot of
Nah.
people coming to me saying that they're standing on a ledge waiting to jump for the world to come to an end, and I always tell them don't do that. I have a feeling you're more reasonably minded too.
I am. For one reason is that I've been around long enough to know that polls are bullshit. They mean absolutely nothing. All they are is a snapshot of a few people at one moment in time. And every one of those people who contributed to that poll could have a totally different opinion an hour later
Right.
because things change.
Right.
The only people whose opinion doesn't change are idiots. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, if you take in information and you apply it, you think about it, then you're going to have a different opinion next week than you did last week, or you should to a certain extent. So, as I say, it's just a snapshot of one particular group of people, usually small and non representative in a particular time. So, they are totally meaningless. Now, I happen to believe that most people are discerning enough to know a rascal when they see one. Obviously, the rabid Trump fans are not, and they're only about 20 to 30% of the population that are that stupid to see Trump as anything other than the grifter and con man and sleazy dog that he is. Everybody else are on a spectrum from he's a sleazy dog down to, well, he ain't my cup of tea. So everybody else is in there somewhere. I don't see him. If it had not been for Comey doing his October surprise on Hillary Clinton, Trump would have been a footnote in history that never achieved anything
Right.
and probably would be in jail now or broke or something. But no, Comey came in with that last minute thing, and Trump got 4 years to screw the country big time. Anybody who can't see that he did that, the million people that are dead because of him and their relatives should be able to realize how bad he was, the economy, how he tanked it, and everything else. And they should be able to see that how Biden has brought back the economy and restored some balance and so forth. They should also be able to see that the House of Representatives is controlled by the Republicans. It's nothing but an obstructionist body that does nothing for them. So, yeah, I have faith that most people deep down realize that Trump is a waste of a vote and they should not do it. And regardless if it's Biden or whoever else it may be, which is looking like it might be somebody else, they will win and Trump will go down. And if I'm wrong, I will find some way to deal with it. But I don't think I'm wrong.
No, no. I mean, since we last talked, we've had the RNC convention, we've had an assassination attempt. Yet, as we sit here today, the biggest story is Joe Biden going to step aside?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a theory on this whole thing, and I want to see what you think, and you'll probably have some points of view about this too. I almost, what we're seeing with Joe Biden seems to be as much a premeditated strategic attack by some Democrats on Joe Biden. And some people think that's crazy. But you don't hear the Republicans talking about Donald or Joe Biden not being competent and he should step aside because they don't want that. They don't want that
No.
at all because they're afraid of who might come after Kamala or whoever. But Here's my contention. First of all, there are a certain amount of people that are afraid of Joe Biden getting into office for one of two reasons. First of all, he's talking about um, giving more breaks to the middle class, taxing the rich, increasing the health care, saving Medicare and all and Social Security and all that stuff. And when he gets to his next term, he can't be bought off. He can't be pressured off. He can go rogue and do whatever the fuck he wants, and that upsets rich people. And rich people control Republicans, but they also control some Democrats too. I think that's number one. And secondly, they're thinking that Joe can't make it over the next 4 years. And God forbid, if he doesn't make it over the next 4 years, we get a black woman as president by fucking default. And I think those two reasons are why we see these Democrats making a concerted effort to try to push him out.
I think that's very insightful of you, Mike, because most people probably don't realize, but this is a racist country. It's always been a racist country. And we had a brief period where it was started in the right direction, but now the powers that be, seeing us going in that direction, immediately started fighting back. And that's where this anti-DEI stuff comes from, the anti-voting rights stuff and so forth. They want a white America because white America can be controlled. That's what corporations want. That's what rich people want. And obviously that's what the Republican Party, which is controlled by those elements, wants too. But we are a racist society. We always have been. And we will continue to be until we stomp it out. And the only way to do that is to continue defeating Republicans wherever they raise their head.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, the thing I find so funny about this, and one of the reasons why I think it's a premeditated strategic plan against Joe Biden, it's just the way it's like he's the redheaded stepchild. And forgive me if you're a redheaded stepchild, but that's just a turn of phrase. But Joe Biden has a bad debate. So they pounce on that and they're all over it. It's almost as if Democrats in the media are kind of laying in wait. So he has the bad debate and they start pounding on him. It isn't going to work. He isn't going to step aside. Then he has another speech that comes up right afterwards. And they say, boy, if Joe fucks this up, he's done. He's done. But he doesn't fuck it up. He does a great
No.
job. And they say, well, that's not really enough. And
Mm.
then it kind of quells for a little while. You have the shooting, you have all this stuff, but then Joe gets COVID. Oh my goodness, there's a fucking vulnerability. And now it heats up again. It seems like a bully trying to find that weak spot, but Joe keeps saying, fuck yourself. Now they're saying, well, the pressure's really on him. He's going to step aside this weekend, in spite of the fact they said that 2 weeks ago, too, and it didn't
Yeah.
work.
Hmm.
I get the impression these people are trying to impose their will on us to make us believe what is not true, because I think the vast majority of people, the more they push on Joe, the stronger they feel about Joe. That's the sense I get from the people I talk to and what I see happening. Polls be damned.
Well, I agree with you mostly on that. I do think there's some people who are coming around to Joe, please go away, that I do respect, and Jamie Raskin being one of them, and a few others. There's others that I don't have as much respect for. The Biden campaign brought up something that I think is worth repeating. And that was that when Barack Obama had finished his second term, and people were vying to be the presidential candidate for the Democrats. Both Obama and pretty much everybody else pushed Joe aside and went with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And the Biden campaign says, "How did that work out for you?"
Yeah.
Uh, I started this off by saying if Comey hadn't done what he
Good
did,
point.
then probably Hillary might have been elected, probably would have been elected. We don't know for sure if that was the breaking point. I personally think it was. It was too late in the game to refute. It made it look like Hillary, might be indicted or something. Nobody really knew. So I think it was really a death stroke to her campaign. But it's a point that should be addressed. I mean, everybody abandoned Joe back then in favor of Hillary, who lost. When it was Joe's turn, nobody wanted him, but he still managed to win and win rather handily.
Yeah,
So I think getting rid of him is a bigger risk than keeping him myself.
absolutely. I agree.
Uh, but at the same time, if they're going to do it, do it. I mean, convince him, because that's what they have to do, is convince Joe. They're not going to ride over him, because if they do, then they just handed the election to Trump.
Right.
So let's once for Democrats try to be smart and not be virtue claiming. Oh, well, he did something wrong, so I'm going to pile on him with the Republicans. That's what they usually do with Democrats who are even accused of anything, like Al Franken, for example, who should still be a senator and probably would be a great vice presidential candidate by now. But
Absolutely.
anyway, they tend to do that. Republicans don't. They'll stick by theirs. I mean, look at the difference now. Bob Mendez is a dog, obviously. I mean, this was his second offense, and he's going to resign and so forth, and that's as it should be. But they at least let it play out.
Right.
Okay. So I give him credit for that, but let's let it play out with Joe. I mean, it's there's time yet. I mean, he's got COVID. He seems to be doing okay with it. Remember who else got COVID? A guy named Trump, I remember, and tried
Right.
to spread it to Biden during the first presidential debate, as I recall. There's nothing to recommend Trump. There are many things to recommend Biden. So let's keep riding with Biden as long as he is willing to do it. That said, I watched him coming off the plane, and he does look frail. He does look old, and that's not an image that you want to project in a candidate. So I'm still holding off and letting it be his decision, and I hope that it will be the right decision. The thing is, we have the resources to elect anyone over Trump. We just have to get together and make sure everybody knows about him, Project 2025, and the whole smear, which is really scarier than Trump for me.
I think one of the biggest mistakes the Democrats could make, if somehow they convince Joe to step aside, and I'm not certain they will. What's fucking Joe got to lose at this point? He's
Yeah,
smarter than all of them. He's got more experience than all of them. He knows what the fuck is up. But it seems like some of these Democrats want him to step aside. They want to jump over Kamala and find somebody else, presumably a white guy like Gavin Newsom. And I like Gavin Newsom just fine. But here's the problem. Since Joe Biden's getting pushed around, he's gotten a big support from people of color. They don't
right,
like seeing Joe get pushed around. So if they
right.
push him aside, they're going to be pissed. But if they jump over Kamala to get a white guy, they're going to be fucking gone. And that's the problem they have. I hope they see that. I mean, because as far as I'm concerned, based on logistics, based on everything, money, everything, if you don't want Joe Biden there, the only choice is Kamala. The only choice is Kamala. And I think some of these people want to try to game the situation and bring somebody from the outside. You could bring in Jamie Raskin, and I love Jamie Raskin,
Nah.
but that would be a mistake at this moment in time.
Well, it could. He's too short, as they say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean by that too.
Yeah.
I'm not going to voice that because everybody knows what I'm talking about here. It doesn't need to be said. Um, and we're not ready for that yet, which is a shame on us. But going back to what I said about this being a racist society, of course they want a white guy. Democrats are no better than Republicans on that. They're
No.
deep down. I mean, when I was growing up, the Democrats were the racist. Okay.
Right.
I mean, well, they were Dixiecrats. Up north it was a little bit different, maybe. But black people of color in general, Hispanics and so forth, know who's trustworthy. They know who isn't. Joe has delivered. He gave them a Supreme Court justice, a black woman Supreme Court justice, and a Hispanic. The Democrats have given them an Hispanic Supreme Court justice, and he gave them a vice president who was not only black but also Asian. So Joe delivers. They can trust Joe. And I don't speak for the black community or people of color or Hispanics, but they say that. Okay. That's what I'm hearing. They support Joe Biden, and
Right.
that's a huge voting block. Okay.
Absolutely. Important. I mean, we think
Okay.
black women pretty much saved it for Joe the last time around.
Absolutely. And they will again. The other thing is Joe has very firmly said we will pass a national right to abortion. We will do that. And I think women trust that. They know that the opposite is true with Trump. So
You know what's an interesting take though, and I'm curious as to what you think about this. I had Old Soul on the
yeah,
program, and she's a black woman. My wife works with a few women that are black, and they have said, "Don't put Kamala in there; she'll never win." Now they're not saying they wouldn't support her, but they're under the perception that we're such a racist country that no way a black woman would win. I disagree with that, especially since the circumstances. If Kamala is the one to be running for president, this is the perfect time for it because I think we've talked about it before. You and I are on the same page. This isn't about the candidates. This is about the very essence, the culture in this country, democracy over authoritarianism, fascism, and people know this. I mean, people have said this in a joking way, but they kind of mean it. I would vote for a ham sandwich over Donald Trump. And I think there is a huge number of people that feel that way. I don't care who it is. I don't care if Joe's slow. I'd rather have democracy than what's ahead of us with Donald Trump and the Republicans coming in.
I think you may or may not be true. What you say may or may not be true on that. I do think Old Soul, and I think she in general would have a much better opinion. Her opinion would be have much more force than either of ours based on
Sure,
that
sure,
particular
absolutely.
topic because she's lived it her whole life. And I do think that if white women had turned out for Hillary Clinton would have been president. They did not. They also didn't turn out for Joe Biden. So I think that's a well-founded guess. Now, I don't know that that's racism, but I do think there's a problem in women voting for women for some reason.
Yeah.
They did not vote for Hillary. I don't know that they would vote for Kamala. And I don't know what it is in the DNA or whatever that influences that. And once again, I must say, white women.
Right. Well, I don't.
Women of color did vote for both, but not for but not the white women. And I love white women. I'm sorry, I do, but yeah,
I know a couple.
overall, there's a problem there, and I'm not sure what it is, but it is there in that they tend not to vote for liberal candidates the way they should because liberals are the one who gave you any rights that you have
I don't
that you
think. I don't think.
we let me put it this way, women took their rights,
Right.
but liberals are the ones who stood back and let them do it.
Right. Well, I don't think Old Soul and these other women that my wife knew said they wouldn't vote for uh, Kamala. I don't think that's what they said. I
Oh
think
no, I'm sure they would vote for her.
they would
Any
vote
women
for.
of color would, but I don't know about the
They
white women.
they just don't trust the racism in this country. And as you
Exactly,
said,
and they shouldn't.
they've experienced it. I can't really talk about racism other than saying I don't like it, but I've never experienced it. So I can't speak intelligently about it. But that's a fear of some black women in this country that Kamala would be a great president. I have no qualms. I think she would be a good president. I would vote for her in an instant if I had the opportunity. But the the feelings about this country being racist is pretty strong in a lot of black people's minds, and justifiably so. That's the interesting thing. Does she know something I don't know? Because I'm a white guy. I know how white people think, reasonably so. I think at this point, people don't care about color or gender or anything like that. We're in a last minute dodge to save this country, and I think people would vote anybody over Donald Trump. The vast majority would. And that's why I'm saying if you did have a black woman running for president, this is the best time. You've got the absolute worst possible opponent. I think we give Donald Trump and the Republicans way too much credit because of these fucking polls. I personally think this election is going to happen and the Democrats are going to win going away because people were afraid in 2020. They showed up. They're even more afraid now. They have more to
Well, they
lose
should be.
now than they do in 2020. And I think it's going to come out in the number of people that come out and vote.
Yeah, I'm always of two minds. Um, I have fears on one side, and I have um, hope on the other, and I'm trying to let the hope win out here. But at the same time, I have a low opinion of the intelligence of most of my countrymen, at least half of them. Uh, uh, to be in any way, for Donald Trump to even be vying for the office, to me is an insult to this country, to the electorate. It says that half the people in this country either aren't paying attention, they're terrible people, or they're stupid.
Right.
Take your pick. That's the
Right.
only people who support Trump. That's the only people who can support Trump. Either they see it to their advantage, they're not paying attention, or they don't have the intellectual ability to go beyond, to be in a homer. I'm a Republican, so I'm voting for Trump.
I, I,
That's pretty much sums it up.
I kind of agree with you that we have an epidemic of stupid running around this country. But that's why I like doing the podcast and the TikToks, because I feel like I'm in an oasis of sorts. Because when you look at the people who send emails to this podcast or come on the show and talk, there are a lot of people that come on the show or send notes into this show that are smarter than I am. So that
Yeah,
makes me feel good. There is a
yeah.
big chunk of people that are smart, and that's why I have confidence in intelligence and decency winning out.
Well, absolutely. And the comments I get both about, well, when I'm on with you, or is, we may not be the smartest guys in the world, but we have a certain ability to articulate what we've heard. There are far smarter people who don't have that ability for whatever reason, or they either haven't developed it or they're shy or whatever. But we have enough confidence, maybe overconfidence, to spout our opinion. But we do. Our opinion is based in reality. It's based in reflection. It's based in knowledge that we've accumulated and that we seek out. We just don't sit here and spew stuff that comes to our head. We have something that we are basing it on, and I think that's what attracts people to your podcast for sure.
Well, I think it's not even about intelligence. It's about how you look at things, and I think you and I, Ed, look at things similarly. People see what they see on TV. I mean, um, uh, I had somebody write to me from England, and they said, "Well, it looks like they're pushing Joe out. I was happy about your confidence, but alas, here's where we are, as if this is going to
Yeah,
culminate into disaster." And the difference between you and I, with you and I to everybody else, is not any great intelligence. It's that we don't panic in these situations. We don't get emotional about it. We sit back, we look at all the facts, and we understand what's going on. I mean, if all hell's breaking loose and the world's going to end, I'll fucking tell you. But I don't see that at this point. If you just slow everything down, don't get emotional, don't get panicky, you'll see there's a way out or something. But people get caught up in this emotional thing. They start rolling down the hill like a fucking snowball until it's way out of proportion. And you got to be careful of that, especially in these particularly dangerous times.
I think we both speak to people too from a base of you're from working class. You grew up in a working class neighborhood,
Yeah.
probably union a lot, and a liberal neighborhood, one that I chose to live in later on, where pretty much the yard signs are going to be DFL.
Right.
For the most part, occasionally a Republican sneak in there, but mostly, at least when I was there, it was Democratic Farmer Labor Party, which is peculiar to Minnesota, but it's the Democratic Party, folks. Now, I grew up in a small southern town during Jim Crow, and my family lived in the black section of town. I mean, we were economically on the low end of things at that point. So I developed an appreciation for the fact that everything I heard people around me saying, including in my own family, saying about black people was a lie. It was rotten. They said they were lazy. I saw them working their asses off for less money than anybody else made just to get by. They said they were dirty. They weren't. They were just as clean as they could be given the circumstances they had to live in. And they probably put more effort into it than anybody else because they wanted to be seen as upstanding citizens. And they tried very much to do that. So I knew everything being told to me a lie was a lie. So I rapidly became a skeptic, not only of just people outside my family, but within. I can remember my father, who was a policeman for a brief time, coming home and telling my mother about how he and three other officers had dragged a black man out of a soda fountain who had been there against the Jim Crow law asking to be served, and how they had, while putting him in the back of the patrol car, one of the other officers had slammed the door repeatedly on the guy's leg to get him inside. I remember my father telling that story to my mother and her saying, well, it wouldn't have happened if he would just go along, you know? And at the time, I that's made sense to me. But the longer I thought about it, it was like, why couldn't he be there? And this is very instructive because about 10 minutes after that conversation, my mother handed me a plate of food and said, take this to Mr. Jameson. Mr. Jameson was an older black man who lived down the street from us in a school bus. He did yard work for people, but he was very reverential. He was very religious. He never ruffled any feathers. He did his work. He came and went and so forth. He helped my mother out on occasion and so forth. So he was a good one,
He
if you
was
know
one of the
what I
good
mean.
ones. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the way he saw it. My father had a ton of black friends, but to him, they were exceptions because he'd been brought up in a racist society. So had my mother, in which black people were different. They were the other, and there were good ones and there were uppity ones. And so I learned that right there. And I learned another thing from Mr. Jameson. I saw people say racist things to him about, let's say, Martin Luther King or something. They say that blah 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 King, and he'd go, I hear what you're saying, and then he'd walk on. I mean, he would. That's called signifying, by the way. It's seeming to agree without doing so. It's learning to live in a society that can kill you if people get the wrong impression. So that's where I come from, and I understand where the power is and where the power has to be fought, and it's never ever in the lower ranks. Crime starts up above in scarcity with them taking everything and not letting anything filter down to those underneath. That's where the problem is. And that's
But
what has to be addressed.
I'm just thinking about this here just to compare things. You and I happen to be two white guys,
Yeah.
but if we had the same personalities and said the same things we say, and we happen to be black, we
Yeah.
wouldn't be the good ones. You and I wouldn't be the good ones. A lot of people out here that are white that speak the way they speak, we wouldn't be the good ones. And that's the problem. White people get to do whatever the fuck they want, and black people have to
Yeah.
watch their P's and Q's, more so back in the 60s and 70s. But even now, I mean, it's starting to flare up again. And that's the disparity in all of this shit.
And that's why I feel an obligation to say it because I
Absolutely.
can say it, and I can go and erase his face and say it to his face. He may take a swing at me, but I can swing back.
Right.
you know this is the thing. I mean, I have a privilege that a lot of people of color do not have, and I am very well aware of that, and that's why I say the things that I say.
Racism always seemed like a stupid thing to me because it really made no sense. I had a father that was racist too. And I had a father who was kind of a narcissistic bully. And growing up, you become a little timid when you get bullied. But when I got to a certain age and I got to a certain size, I said, I'm not standing for this shit anymore and I'm going to push back. And it worked for me. And in addition to that, when I saw other people being bullied, that kind of triggered me too. And because I
Yeah.
had strength at that point, I could walk up and tell the bully to take a fucking walk. Personally, I see racism as the epitome of bullying.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the person isn't stronger than the white person. It's just the what white people were afforded then and black people couldn't do. That was bullying. I mean, if you're a man and you're married to a woman who hits you with things, and you're bigger than she is, and you could hit back, but you don't because you can't because she's a woman, you're being bullied by that person. Anytime somebody cannot react to whatever you're imposing on them, you're a bully. And I saw racism as the epitome of bullying, and it fucking annoys me. And if I ever see something like that, as much as I should probably keep my mouth shut sometimes, you know as well as anybody, I have trouble with that.
That's what I like you, Mike. I like people who have trouble keeping their mouths shut in the face of injustice. They're my favorite people.
Well,
Too many people remain quiet because they're afraid that it will come back on them. And that's why, I mean, I tell people to their face here now, um, your parents were racist just like mine were, and your grandparents were racist just like mine were. And don't tell me that we never had a race problem here, because we did. What you're telling me is that white people didn't have a race problem. That's all you're telling me.
right,
So
right.
shut up and get out of my face.
Right. And I will just correct that. My father was racist. My grandparents kind of racist. They were good people and they treated people well, but they grew up in a time when racism was accepted. My mom, furthest thing from racist. She was a wonderful woman. She believed everybody was equal. And that may be the only thing that saved me growing up.
Well, I may have mentioned this before, but it's something I'm passionate about. So I'm going to throw it in again. Um, the Atticus Finch, you know who Atticus is, right?
Right.
From
Kill a
To
Mockingbird.
Kill a Mockingbird. Okay. Um, Most people know, or at least think they've read that book. Most of them have seen the movie, maybe, but they think they read the book, but they haven't. There's a character in the movie. I mean, in the book, that never made it into the movie, and because of when the movie was made, I think was why. Or maybe he was, just they saw in the film they had to cut some stuff out. But anyway, he's a white man. He's married to a black woman, or at least he lives with a black woman, and he pretends to be a drunk. He carries a bag around with him with a bottle in it that has Coke in it, but he pretends he's a drunk because that gives him the ability to function in this society. Well, he's just no drunk. Who cares who he lives with? Kind of thing, right? But
Right,
he's
right.
actually in love with this woman that he lives with. Now, Atticus, on the other hand, everybody sees him as a hero. He's what we call a white savior, right? He stands up for the black man who eventually gets killed anyway, but he stands up for the black man in the trial, and he's seen as this paragon, right? And we all admire him, and we the book is taught in schools. Some places are banning it because it uses a certain word that we've avoided it all morning, and we will continue to avoid. The thing is, the the author whose name just went out of my head, which things do on occasion, but
Ed, we need to have you step aside. If you can't remember the name of the book or the author, you're going to need to step aside and make room for somebody who's younger.
That's true. Yeah. Pardon me while I fall down over here. It'll come to me before we're done. But anyway, she wrote a different book to begin with. It's called Go Set a Watchman. And most people have not read it because it laid in a drawer for 40 years or longer. It was the one she sent to the publisher first. It's a bit shorter, same characters, but it's quite a bit different. The Atticus in that book is a much different guy. The Whereas the Atticus in To Kill a Mockingbird seems to be a fine, upstanding a guy who hates racism and so forth. Well, in Go Set a Watchman, which is far truer because both are based on the author's own father, he realizes that he lives in a racist society and that he can't escape it because he grew up in it. It's part of him. And his solution to that is to raise his daughter not to be,
Right.
which to me is a far greater and better message than the one that you get from To Kill a Mockingbird. It's probably still there because he's instructing his kids not to be racist and he tells them things, but it's a different look at the character. And I strongly encourage everybody to read go set a watchman, because you get that is the responsibility of the thinking person who's raised in a racist society and can't quite escape it. To raise your kids, they will key in on the anti-racism that you're giving them, and they will escape it. And that's the only way to do it, to realize that you may have some racist tendencies, but you've got to address those and pass on to your children the idea of equality for everybody. And then racism will die out.
Well, and the author you're looking for, I think, if I heard this right, is Harper Lee. Is that what you were
Yes,
saying?
Harper Lee, thank
Harper
you.
Lee. She was a close.
Go set a watchman is the book. You can read it in a day easily.
Really? Well, not if you're a
And
Republican.
somebody should make it as a sequel,
And it,
because even though it was written first, you could pick it. Kind of picks up right after the trial, because her older brother grows up and she's kind of a scout, is still the central character, but she's growing up. Her friend, uh, the weird little guy, he's out
yeah,
of the picture now. Her brother has grown up, is in high school, and she has a lot of struggles and so forth. It's still a great read, but I think it's a far truer work to what she wanted to say, because it's maybe a little bit less emotionally acceptable to white people. Let me put it that way. It was the story she really wanted to tell.
yeah, yeah. It's. I've seen the movie. I don't know that I read the book because I'm a lazy bastard. But it is an interesting. It is an interesting story, and it came out in the '60s, right? '50s,
Yeah.
'60s. Okay, so it
Mm-hmm.
was a precursor to some of the things we're looking at now. With the way it stands right now, they're saying Joe's going to step aside this weekend. They said that 2 weeks ago. It didn't happen. Joe stayed strong. I don't know what reason Joe would have to step aside, what pressures they could apply. They'll say stuff like the polls say he's dropping, and I haven't seen those polls. I haven't seen one poll that suggests that. It doesn't suggest he's winning, but it's close and no less close than it was before. From what I've seen too after this shooting, which we'll talk about in the next segment, Donald Trump hasn't taken a jump from that either. Then they'll say something like this. They'll say, well, the fundraising has dried up. And I find that interesting because Joe has $200 million in the bank.
Yeah.
Most of that money came from small donors. The
Yeah.
people who say they're not going to give him money are the big donors, which I
Yeah.
find ironic. They're going to dry up until if this goes by the wayside, they're going to be back. They're just trying to use their money as leverage, but Joe's already got
Exactly.
money, and the money is coming from the people. And let's be honest, those 96% that gave him $200 or less are far more valuable than one or two people giving him $50 million.
Not only that, if I were Joe, I would say, "Who you going with? I'm
Yeah.
not going anywhere. Who you going with? Are you gonna at the convention? Are you gonna go after me? Are you gonna mess things up? You're gonna have 5 or 6 different factions here. That's the way to lose. No, you wanted me. You gave me your money. What's your alternative? Are you going to vote for Trump now? Are you not going to vote? Where's your money going to go? What are you going to do with it? Come on, stick with me. Ride with Biden a little longer and we can win." So this is the thing. I mean, the media I wrote off long ago.
Yeah.
I mean, the media is they're always going to go for the horse race and they're going to go for the drama. That's what it comes down to. The news became entertainment long ago, and they know what brings people in is outrage and a horse race. So that's what they're going to play. And right now they should be talking about that speech that Trump gave the other night, where he admitted to colluding with Putin on the invasion of Ukraine. He told me it was his dream. He told me that.
I,
So
th- I,
he was colluding with a foreign enemy to invade a peaceful country. He admitted that.
well, I think you make a good point as far as them jumping on the hot story that's going to drum up
Yeah.
the most fear and all this stuff. Um, what people have to understand, if Joe Biden steps aside, if he actually does that, Huge fucking story. Everybody's going to be watching it. And I know this is a fact because I've experienced it on TikTok. If I'm doing my regular TikToks, I get a regular amount of people coming in and watching it. It's growing, but it's a regular amount. But one big story, I do a video, and that might even not be that compelling because I don't know that much. But because I'm talking about that particular topic,
Yeah,
fucking four times as many people watch it. And that's
yeah,
what the media is experiencing. They want Joe to step aside because that's a big story. They don't care about the country. They don't care about politics. They don't care about the people. They want that big story, that sensational story that's going to make them money.
absolutely. And so I'm the media, with very few exceptions, maybe no exceptions, is on that bandwagon because it's become a profit center. And once money enters, integrity goes out the window. It's that
Yeah.
simple. I don't care what you're talking about, whether you're talking about healthcare, whether you're talking about prisons, whether you're talking about the media. Once the money comes in, or the profit motive comes in, integrity dies, and so does quality.
You know, I had written pretty much everybody off, but I continued to watch MSNBC. In the last couple of weeks, I become dismayed with
Yeah,
MSNBC. Not everybody. I like Lawrence O'Donnell. I like Joy Reid, but a lot of those fucks have fallen into the trap that
yeah.
where there are people above them telling them you got to do this, you got to do that. They're not telling us the news anymore. They're trying to drum up excitement.
Well, absolutely. I mean, they all they all try to project this air of independence, but they are all guided, and
Yeah,
they're all guided from above. And they get their message that if you watch the various MSNBC hosts, which I do, pretty much all of them, and you're right, Lawrence O'Donnell is by far the best.
yeah,
If you watch them, you're going to get pretty much you can tell a unified message there. It's rare that one will go off on a tangent and say, no, that's not right. And that's not as it should be. I'm not in favor of managed news, whether it's on the left or on the right. I mean, Fox News is not news, okay? So if I say on the right, I'm talking about CNN now,
right.
not Fox. Fox is never to be considered anything but what it is, simple propaganda to make money by telling people on the right what they want to hear. That's all Fox is, and there's no reason to watch it, period. CNN is now the organ of the right that pretends to be a news organization.
Right, right. Well, you know what was the red flag for MSNBC for me is they had a guy who was doing fill-ins. He was a guest, and then he'd fill in. His name was Mendy or Mehdi Hassan. You
Yeah,
know who he is?
yeah,
This motherfucker was a bulldog, and he'd
oh
push
yeah,
people back. He'd twist them in circles. He was good. So they rewarded him by giving him a weekend show, not during the week,
yeah,
but on the weekend show. And then
yeah,
they just recently fired him. The one
yeah,
motherfucker that pushes back, the one motherfucker that knows how to talk to these people, and they fire him. He was
yeah,
good at it, he was effective at it, and apparently that was his problem.
yeah. Apparently, it is. They want somebody who is. Well, it's always been the case since as far back as I can remember that they want they want you to think they're bringing you the left and the right. What they're really giving you is right of center and far right.
Right, right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, Ed, we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back.
Okay, doke.
We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. We've got Ed with us, as we so often do, and we're talking about any number of things. One of the things that just happened, just ended, on Thursday, the
Yeah,
RNC, the Republican National Convention. And the way I saw it, it looked to me like it was basically a cross between a tractor pull and a freak show. The freak show being the fucking clowns dressed in the costumes they were dressed in. And then the tractor pull was like Hulk Hogan, a B-list star, and Kid Rock, and then Dana White from the UFC. All these B-list celebrities out there yelling for Donald Trump. It was, if I'd been a Republican, I would have been embarrassed by what went on there.
Absolutely. And of course, Trump himself was nothing but falsehoods like usual, but you had a lot of others too. One I noticed in particular, and I did a meme of it, of Tom Emmer featuring Chris
Oh, fuck.
Farley as you remember Chris Farley, who used to do the motivational speaker. So
Live in a van down by the river. Yeah.
that's what it reminded me of. I put
Yeah.
it up, and it did very well on TikTok because what a loser. I mean, how does this guy stay in office? That's what I want to know. He's nothing but an attitude in a suit, and a
Yeah.
bad suit, a bad fitting suit at that. He's just an attitude. That's all he is. He accomplishes nothing. It embarrasses me that he serves in Minnesota, or he represents the section of Minnesota. Then you had Don Jr.'s girlfriend,
Kimberly Guilfoyle.
Kimberly telling how in World War II our soldiers fought communists. No, we were allied with the communists, Kimberly. Get a history book. And then, of course, you got Trump himself lying for 90 minutes, putting people to sleep. I mean, half the people in the place were asleep by the time he was done. And what's this deal with Hannibal Lecter all of a sudden?
I don't know.
Does anybody know what he's even trying to say while he's talking about the late, great Hannibal Lecter?
Yeah,
Um,
it doesn't make any sense. Before we get to Trump, because there's so much shit to talk about
yeah,
Trump, I want to talk about Kimberly Guilfoyle for a moment.
yeah,
Old Soul refers to her as gargoyle, which seems
yes.
appropriate when you look at her.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about this before, and everybbe wants Gavin Newsom to run for president, but he has one skeleton in his closet. Gavin
Almost
used to,
literally.
yeah,
Yeah.
Gavin used to be married to Kimberly Guilfoyle. Now, if you look back in those days, she looked much different, presuming
Yeah.
she wasn't mentally diminished at that point. But this woman, this is how racist these motherfuckers are. Kimberly Guilfoyle was put up on stage to talk about the plight of black women.
Yeah.
How fucking embarrassing and insulting is that? Kim, go get us the black women's vote. Do a couple lines and then act like you're black.
Yeah. I mean, it boggles the mind. All I can figure is that they have to give lip service, but they know they're not going to get many black votes. I mean, uh, Tim Scott or somebody like these other the Quislings, the traitors, all of them. And I got to throw this in real quick. It just popped into my mind. They're talking about how the Democrats need to tone everything down. Wasn't it last week that the Republican candidate for North Carolina governor, a black man, was
Yeah.
saying, there's a lot of people that need killing? You remember that one?
Yeah. I heard a similar I heard a similar quote years ago when somebody was interviewing an old gangster.
Yeah,
And somebody said, "How many people did you kill?" And he said, "I didn't kill anybody that didn't need killing."
yeah,
But we've got a
exactly.
governor fucking saying that, for Christ's
Well,
sake.
a would-be governor,
Well, would
you
be
know.
governor. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's
And won't be governor, actually.
how do you, I mean, how do you not be aware enough to know that you got to filter out crazy shit like this? I mean, this is what the Republicans do. They say some outrageous shit. You wanted to bring up JD Vance. That
Yeah.
motherfucker has said some crazy shit, and now he wants to act like, well, I never really said it, or I didn't mean it, or I changed my mind. You're not a fan of JD Vance, I'm guessing.
No, and because we come from the same thing to an extent, okay. You ever hear of the Hillbilly Highway?
I've heard of it. Is that the Appalachian thing?
Well, what it is, that what they talked about was it was the route that people took out of the South up into the Midwest where the jobs were, Ohio and Indiana. That's where JD comes from. That's where he's a senator now, by the skin of his teeth, I might
Right,
add.
right, right.
But he wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy. It's his story, and he it's the story of his family who I'm going to use a term that if I wrote it on TikTok or said it on TikTok or other places, it would, I'd get like a violating community standards. And it's a two-word phrase called white trash.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, this
And
is a
that's,
safe place. You can say
yeah,
that shit here.
exactly. See, I grew up with it. My mom talked about white trash all the time. You can't play with them. They're white trash. Her mom was white trash, that kind of stuff. And it was Southern people, lower income Southern people primarily, although I'm sure rich people used it too. But it was to differentiate between people who tried to do right, went to church, that sort of thing, and those who got drunk and fell about the place, didn't work, and had 50 illegitimate children and all of that. That's what they considered white trash. Okay. And he basically says, this is what my family was. They left the South, they went up to Ohio, they got hooked on opioids and all of this, and drunk and all of this. They're just trash. It's all they are. And then I'd go back down to Kentucky or wherever it was, and I think it was Kentucky, stay with my grandma and grandpa, and I get their values, right? And then I'd have to go back and live with my drug addicted mother and so forth. There's a movie too. Ron Howard directed it. I don't recommend it, but and I don't recommend the book. But he basically trashes his background in that book. And now he's trying to come back and say, well, though, and he labels them. He says it's their fault. They have
Right.
this character flaw that they do this. This is what Hillbilly Elegy presses. It says this. These people are trash, right?
Right.
I read the book.
I
Now
watched the
he
movie, so I know exactly what you're saying.
But now he's trying to say, well, they're victims of the elite. He's completely changed his message. So just like he did with Trump, one minute he's telling her, telling us, well, I think he's America's Hitler. And then he goes and he literally, Trump even said it. JD is sitting right there in the front row and he goes, and look, here's JD Vance kissing my ass. He humiliated the guy and then made him come up and say nice things about him. And now he makes him vice president because he humiliated himself. He humbled himself before Trump. He made McCarthy do the same thing. He makes them all do that. He only included Marco Rubio in the mix to humiliate him again. And you can bet that at some point he's going to make Nikki Haley pay again too, because she was up there endorsing him. But it ain't over, folks. Trump
No,
never forgets,
no, he
and
never
uh,
forgets.
and he will go after Mike Pence again too. I guarantee you. But
Well,
here he's picked a guy who says, well, I wouldn't have done what Mike Pence did. I would have, done what Trump wanted me to do. So he's got his yes man. He's got his, and JD Vance, what did he do? Okay, he went in the Marines. I give him credit for that. He went to Harvard. I give him credit for that. Then he goes to work for Nazi Peter Thiel. I mean,
right.
Peter Thiel is a tech investor from South Africa, just like Elon Musk, and they come from that South African apartheid base. And there's nobody more nasty and Nazi than South African apartheid people, and that includes Elon.
You know, the thing about it is these aren't the finest people, and JD Vance, he's 39 years old. His total time in politics has been the 2 years he's been in Senate. He's
And
been
he's
an
done
author.
nothing.
He's worked
Yeah.
in tech. It's ironic that he would complain or warn us against the elite, coming from a guy who's a millionaire who worked in Simi Valley and in tech.
Yeah.
He is the elite,
Yep.
and he's inexperienced and he's dangerous. The fact that he won um, the Senate seat in Ohio is absolutely fucking amazing to me. But I think Donald Trump, usually when you pick a vice president, it's usually a strategic move. And he maybe looked at it as a strategic move because he's from Ohio and he thinks that'll help him win Ohio. But it really was a bad choice. Donald Trump has embraced overturning Roe v. Wade, says he was responsible for it. And now all of a sudden, even though we saw it years ago
Yeah.
or a couple of years ago, that, yeah, this abortion thing, that's not a winner for us in the election. So,
Right.
so we're going to soften it a little bit. We're still going to be for banning abortion, but we're going to soften it and they'll like it a lot better. So then he comes and gets J.D. Vance, who is for a national abortion ban. He's told women that, look, you got to stay in the marriage no matter what, even if there is domestic violence. I've said there's a war on women and children by the Republican Party, and he is the epitome, the perfect illustration of that. And Donald Trump thinks he can ride the fence. If I soften on abortion, then the evangelicals will get mad, but I'll bring in J.D. Vance to keep the evangelicals happy, and then we'll see if we can get the people who support Roe v. Wade to calm down because we're not being so mean about it. That ain't going to work. It's just not going to
No,
work.
I could sum up Vance, Tim Scott, and Lindsey Graham with two words, all three of them. And I'll throw in Marco Rubio: self-loathing. They
Oh,
hate who they are. They hate where they come from. They want to be seen as mainstream. They
I
want to
agree.
be part of the mainstream. And because Tim Scott is black and Rubio is Hispanic and Vance is white trash and Lindsay is probably gay. They
I
hate what they are.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that is why they go so far toward the right wing, is because they're in self-denial that if I can be so far against all of this, that people will see me as part of the mainstream.
you want to hear an interesting data point. I haven't verified it absolutely, but I've heard it from many sources. Here's an interesting fact about the RNC in Milwaukee. During the time of the RNC in Milwaukee, the app Grinder fucking crashed because of how
Yeah.
much it was being used in Milwaukee. That's the interesting thing about Republicans. The LGBT community is pretty well represented in the Republican Party, which is fine, except for the fact that they deny LGBTQ and they're trying to harm LGBTQ. That's that's more despicable than, if somebody just doesn't like gay people, that's one thing. But if you're gay or support that lifestyle and you're against your own people, that's even more despicable in my mind. I'm not gay, so I don't know. I'm speaking out of turn here, but fucking hypocritical.
Well, I was in theater for 60 years. Half my friends are gay.
Right.
Half of them have either gay, lesbian, got a few transgender friends. Um, they all feel that way, that these people are traitors. They are, seeking to advance themselves by standing on everybody else. And they are the ones who will call out Lindsey Graham. Because of course they see it, they know what he is, and
Yeah.
the same with Tim Scott, same with Marco Rubio, same with any of these people who embrace a party that despises their people, the base that they come from, whether it be Hispanic, black, gay, or lower income white.
Tim Scott reminds me of a kid I grew up with. There was this kid. He was a goofy kid. He was not the best looking kid, maybe a little bit overweight. And I'm not disparaging him, but he was also kind of an asshole. But in
Yeah,
order to be part of the crowd, he would constantly tell us about his girlfriend who lived in Idaho and we lived in Minnesota.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Tim Scott's girlfriend lives in a different state, but they've got a close relationship.
Yeah, she lives next. She roommates with Lindsey Graham's.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think I've said this before and nobody will believe me because everybody's so terrified. I think with this mess that we have going on with the Republicans and with the Democrats and all the troubles, there always comes a point when you're in these situations where there's a turning point or a pivot point. You go from just the darkest before the dawn, really. And I think
Yeah.
that day is coming in November because I think, regardless of who the candidate is, people are just so tired and scared of the Republican Party at this point. They've done so much damage to themselves that come November, the Republicans are going to be absolutely surprised by what happens, and all the people that have been worried about it are going to be surprised, and we are going to start to see a clearing. That doesn't mean we don't have a lot of shit to fix with the Democrats and in this country generally, but this can only go on so long, and I feel a certain sense of destiny where it's rising to the surface like a fever blister, but it's going to pop, and then we're going to start heading a different direction. Do you get that feeling?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'll tell you why. Because you remember the Puritans, you know who they were? They
Yeah,
were some of the earliest settlers up in Massachusetts, only because the ship went the wrong way. They were supposed to go to Virginia along with everybody else, but they wound up in Massachusetts.
right.
But they were chased out of England to Holland, and then out of Holland to here. But they had a brief period of glory in England where they rose up under Oliver Cromwell. They they beat the army. Their whole thing was to purify the Church of England, which of course was needed purifying because it was Catholic light that had been instigated by Henry VIII, who threw out the Catholics and declared his own religion with him as the head of it.
Right.
Right. So they rose up, they defeated it, they chopped off the head of Charles I, the king, and they had a brief reign where they just it was Republican heaven in that they closed down the theaters and everything. They just tried to make everybody wear black and walk in a straight line, right? Well, that lasted a few years, and then everybody said, "Nah, we don't like this so much. Get the hell out of here." And they brought back Charles II from France, put him back in as king, and got rid of the Puritans.
Right.
Okay, that's what I see happening this fall. We're going to get rid of the Puritans because the Puritans are always people who want other people to behave in a certain way while they crash Tinder. Okay, that's who the
Grinder.
Puritans are.
Grinder.
I mean, Grinder. Well, they probably did Tinder too. But yeah, I've always, because like I said, I worked in theater. I had a lot of friends, and they always said that the gay prostitutes said, when the Republicans come to town, everybody works.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think we're looking at a despicable crowd of people in the Republican Party. And I used to say, well, it's just those people that are MAGA that follow Donald Trump. But I have to lump them all together now because if you aren't
Yeah,
part of MAGA, you've been complicit
yeah.
or an accessory after the fact. You've all just went along to get along, and you're all guilty at this fucking point.
Yeah, I do it. It's exactly the same thing as the town I grew up in. There were virulent racists in my hometown who despised black people and did everything they could to plague them. And then there were other people who were not virulent racists, but they didn't interfere. They stood back, they watched,
Did
they
you?
went along.
Yeah. Exactly. Did you watch Donald Trump's speech? I watched part of it. I
I
watched
did
part of
not.
it,
I can't do it.
and when it looked like it was coming to the end, I was going to do a live and turn that into a podcast. So I went live on TikTok. I went
Yeah,
for like another hour on live, and that motherfucker was still talking. And the shit
yeah,
he when he first came out, he was talking very low energy. And I thought, well, maybe this shooting had something affected him. And he was basically reading a script and he was doing the best he can. But
yeah,
I was thinking about your theater experience and what I saw with Donald Trump in this particular portion, maybe 17, 18 minutes. It looked like a very poorly written one man show. He's trying
yeah,
to be dramatic. He was talking about the guy who got shot and killed,
yeah,
and then he had his coat and his hat there, and Donald Trump goes back. He goes behind the coat and the hat, and he kisses the helmet. It was just
yeah,
so fucking corny and so fabricated. It was ridiculous. And so I think, okay, he's just gonna walk out of here and it's gonna be calm and he's gonna be told to behave and he'll just do that. And everybody think, oh, Joe, Donald Trump's changed. But then he goes off for about an hour with crazy shit. They're coming from insane asylums into our country. The economy was shitty now, but it was great then. Everything he says was a fucking lie. He was
yeah,
unhinged.
yeah.
If there's anybody that should be embarrassed about their performance in front of a big audience, Donald Trump in that speech was absolutely an embarrassment.
Well, it reminded me of Spinal Tap. You remember where the band kind of breaks up and they have to do a concert anyway. So the one that's left stands up and says, "Well, I hope you like our new direction," and then they just play instrumental music and stuff. It seems like to me that he sensed that he was putting people to sleep, so he decided to do his greatest hits.
Yeah.
That's what he did. And everything from the disproved stuff about the election to Hannibal Lecter to whatever you want to throw in there. The either coming from the insane asylums or coming, well, they'd be empty by now, don't you think? This has
I
been
would
going
think
on for a
so. I
while.
would think so.
You'd think that would be the case. Everybody knows he's a liar, but they know he's a useful tool so far as the it's not even the Republicans of the RNC anymore. It's so far above that. It's the
Yeah.
oligarchs, the BlackRock people, the all of these people that you don't even know who they are. The Heritage Foundation, which once upon a time I think might have been a legitimate conservative think tank, but it has gone so crazy off the rails now. It's just nothing but an insane asylum in itself. Um, and it exists for one thing. If you want to read the 2025 manifesto, what it comes down to is one thing: getting rid of all regulation on corporations and rich people, getting rid of all the rules that we put in place in the 20th century to put a curb on this predatory capitalism, getting rid of all of that, whether it's the National Weather Service or whoever it may be, anybody who regulates anything that rich people want to make money from. That's what it's all about. That's what the Republican Party wants to do. They've been doing it since Reagan, and now they're going for the final push. So whether it's Trump, whether somebody else puts a bullet in his head tomorrow and they got to get somebody else, it's going to be the same thing.
Yeah.
This is the idea. This is the idea, is to get rid of regulation, to get rid of because you don't need government to protect the strong and the wealthy. They'll take care of themselves. You need government to protect the little guy. It's always been that way. And that's what they're trying to get rid of.
Right, right. I don't know if you've noticed on TikTok, I don't know how much you've been scrolling, but there's been some viral stuff going on that could spell a little trouble for the Heritage Foundation. There was this young woman who was on TikTok, and she didn't have a lot of followers, but she kind of exploded. She did some deep diving and found out that the Heritage Foundation is a
One,
5013C.
yeah, they're
And
not supposed to be political.
they can't be political, otherwise they're
Yeah,
not tax exempt anymore.
right.
So
Mm-hmm.
this young woman found the form to make a complaint to the IRS and put it up in her links, and it was almost all filled out. All they had to do was sign it and whatever, and email it directly to the IRS. IRS has got tens of thousands of these complaints. Now the IRS has to react to this. You
Yeah,
can't have that kind of outrage and not react to it. And the fact is, they are absolutely guilty of what they aren't supposed to be doing. So it's going to be
right.
interesting to see if the IRS takes them down, takes away their tax exempt status, and puts them in place. But what warms my heart about this, we can't trust the government, the DOJ, the judicial system to do the right thing. People here on the internet, whether it be social media or podcast, are finding ways to get the power to strike back. This pisses off the wealthy people because they can't control it like they can control MSNBC. But I fucking absolutely love seeing that.
Me too. And that's what everybody has to remember, is that there are heroes in the shadows working all the time. So don't give up.
No,
But do bear in mind that's what the Republicans have in mind, taking away all the constraints on the wealthy. That's what it's all about. They bought the Republican Party years ago, pre-Reagan. Probably, well, shoot. But for the brief interval that the Democrats had with Roosevelt, they've been pretty much in charge over years, and they do nothing but trash the economy for the rest of us, suck up as much money as they can until we wise up enough to put a Democrat back in charge to try to restore the balance. But we've never actually been able to do that since Roosevelt. That brief shining time that we were able to it was about one generation, about 20 years, in which the common man was ascendant, thanks to Roosevelt, thanks to the Democratic Party. No Republican has ever done anything good for you. Just remember that.
Well, we got to get to this topic. I don't want to put too much importance to this, and that may sound sacrilegious to some. In the 60s, when I was growing up, you were a little bit older, we had four
Yeah.
major assassinations:
Yeah.
JFK, RFK, MLK, and Malcolm X. There might have been others too, but that all happened in a 10-year
Medgar
period.
Evers.
Medgar Evers, yeah. Emmett Till, was that in the 60s?
Yeah, that was not an assassination, though. That was just a plain old lynching.
But still,
Yeah.
it was a murder for hate crimes or whatever. And
Yeah.
then in 80, we know that Ronald Reagan got shot. He survived, of course. So
Which
it's
was
that
not political, by the way.
no, he was trying to impress Jodie
Foster.
Foster. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
had no point in politics. But when we were growing up, assassinations weren't. I won't say they weren't uncommon, but we'd experienced them.
We missed one more. George Wallace didn't
George Wallace.
assassinate him, but they tried. And
They
Ford, they tried.
and Ford twice with Ford.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there was a lot of them back when we were younger. Now it's been basically like 40 years, 45
Mm-hmm.
years since an assassination attempt, which tells us a lot. And we get this one in Pennsylvania, and people are freaking out about it, and they should freak out about it. It is kind of
Mm-hmm.
a lapse in security, and it just talks about the times and the adversarial times that we have now. We're divided, and people are responding by fighting and violence and that sort of thing. I was sitting in a restaurant with my wife when I heard about it, and I'm not going to say what I thought, but
I know what you thought. I know what I thought.
my
You
fingers
know.
were crossed. I'm going to tell you that. Um, and of course, I found out all about it. What was the first reaction you had when you saw it? Because I know my first reaction, and I don't know if I should be embarrassed by this or be prophetic. When I found out it happened and he wasn't seriously injured, sadly, I thought it was staged, because
Yeah. So
that's not beneath Donald Trump to do something like that.
I was actually on Facebook, I think, when it happened. Somebody put it up, and I went to the comments, and probably the first 30 comments were
Yeah,
staged, not real, staged. That's what everybody thought. The fact that people died, of course, I think means that it wasn't. But
that's my
there's,
thinking too.
yeah,
If it was,
but there's something inside me that thinks they just see that as collateral damage. You
yeah,
know,
I mean, see, that's the
who
problem.
encouraged this kid? You know,
Yeah, well, and that's the problem here. That's the sickness in this country. If it were any other situation, if Obama had been up there, even if George Bush would have been up there, we wouldn't have thought it could be
no,
staged. We would
no.
never have thought that. But because it's Donald Trump, because we know who he is and the kind of egregious shit he's done, we all sit here and say it might be staged.
Mm-hmm.
I have a perfect way they can prove it wasn't staged. Show us the ear, and um and show us the doctor's report. Because I'm not a weapons specialist. You've shot weapons of similar
Oh yeah,
kinds. My contention is, and tell me if I'm wrong, even if you get nicked in the ear with a high velocity round from an AR-15, it's going to take a chunk out. And
it's
I
going
don't
to take
get,
the ear.
yeah, it's going to take the whole fucking ear, but his ear is still there. And it
Yeah.
was there when you saw the bloody, that's the thing I look for. When I saw the bloody ear, it was fully intact. I didn't see a
Well,
knife.
I'm going to tell you this right now. I guarantee you that no bullet hit Donald Trump. A piece of the teleprompter hit Donald Trump. A piece of glass from the teleprompter is what hit his ear. It was not a bullet. No, I guarantee you that there would have been And if I threw a baseball at you and it just clipped your ear, you would know it. Your head would move, right? All it hits is your ear. All Trump did was his hand went up,
Yeah.
right?
And just kind
No,
of winced.
right. He just kind of winced. No, he was not hit by a bullet. The bullet hit the other guy. The bullets hit the other people, right? And I got to say this, right? Anybody says to me, God pushed that bullet aside, I will punch him in the face, and then I will explain to them that what God pushed the bullet aside into the head of the firefighter. Is that
Yeah.
what you're telling me?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Yeah.
no,
There you
no.
go. Well, there's other people that think, since his ties to WWE, that if it was staged, he knew it was coming and maybe had a little razor blade and just cut himself. So
Yeah,
the blood, because if you get cut in the head or the ear, it's
yeah.
going to bleed a fucking lot.
Well, you know what? We heard the bullet, but then he puts his hand up there, so who knows? Who knows,
That
right?
that that's my point. And I'm embarrassed for myself to suggest that it was staged. And like you said, because somebody died, my first response was, well, it couldn't have been staged. Nobody'd be that fucking crazy to
But then you
use
thought
somebody as
about it,
collateral.
didn't you?
I can't help but think about it
Well,
based on
remember
what he's done.
Timothy McVeigh, who blew up the government center? Um, People said, well, what about all those kids who died? Collateral damage,
Yeah,
yeah, they think that way. Of course they do. I'm not saying it was staged. I'm just saying it's a shame that we think that way.
yeah.
And we think that way because we believe that they could be, because we've seen Timothy McVeigh. We know how he felt about it. We know why he did it. And it was a cold, rational decision to blow up a building to make a statement.
Well, and
And why
yeah,
would they not do that with the same thing?
well, in the speech, of course, Donald Trump tried to make himself out the hero. I
Oh
was
yeah.
shot. I shouldn't be here. God saved me. God chose me, and all that shit. But we're questioning everything about Joe Biden and his mental capacity and his physical capacity, but they give Donald Trump a pass. But if you're a presidential candidate 4 months from the election and you get shot because he said he got shot,
Yeah.
aren't we entitled to the doctor's report to understand what really happened and to what extent it happened? Shouldn't we get that? And why aren't we getting it? And why is nobody in the media demanding it?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, they can say, well, we know the guy was there. He shot the bullets. And so, but yeah, I mean, I guarantee you he was hit by a piece of glass, period. Um, Whether he cut himself or not, I don't know. But I do know that an AR-15 round would have taken the ear off,
Yeah.
the whole thing, and would have knocked him down. I know that. I used to shoot them. And they're only good for one thing.
Right.
That's killing people. And anybody tells you anything else is a liar. That's all they're good for. They're not good for hunting. They're not good for home defense. They're not good for anything except predetermined, premeditated killing. That's all they're good for.
Now, everybody who was a Democrat in the country, when they heard he got shot, they held their breath,
Mm-hmm.
thinking it's going to be some crazy Democrat. But what we find out is that it is a registered Republican. He is a conservative. I found it weird that he had no criminal history, no mental illness history, and he's shooting a guy with all those things. It's just
Yeah.
fucking crazy. Um, we also heard
Hey,
this thing. Well, he gave money to to some Democratic thing. Later, we find out it was a guy with the same name who happened to be 69 years old.
yeah, not him. Yeah.
I think as much as this kid was political, he's a 20-year-old kid. And what I know about 20-year-old kids, having been one and having raised a couple, they don't know fuck all about fuck all. I
No.
unless he was encouraged to do it, somebody else gave a different scenario. And I told it to my wife. She goes, that kind of makes sense. Because 20-year-old men have all this angst and emotional shit and whatever. Um, and said, what if his parents were staunch Trumplafucks? They've proven that. They've got the documentation on on the roles of the Republican Party. His mom and dad were strongly on that. What if this 20-year-old kid considers himself a conservative because mom and dad do, and he's living at home, he doesn't have a job, or he does have a job, or he's mouthy or whatever, and he gets in this big argument with his dad, and he wants to
Hmm.
get his dad back? What better way to do it? I'm going to shoot the one guy he loves.
Well, that's possible. Let me give you
That's
something
possible. Yeah.
I just heard. He researched appearances of both candidates.
Right.
He researched the DNC and the RNC. He picked the one that came to closest to him first.
Right. Right.
I think it was not necessarily a Jodie Foster impression or trying to impress Jodie Foster, but it was an existential act. He was apparently bullied. He was apparently a loner. I mean, we heard some of that. I've heard other things, maybe not, but as much. But there was something going on there. He just wanted to shoot a candidate. I don't think it had anything to do with Trump or Biden. I doubt that he knew much about either one. Although if he came from a political household, he might have known something about Trump, or at least why his parents supported him. But it's very possible it was an act of rebellion against his parents, very much. But I think it was just a crime of opportunity. I think where the Republicans are trying to make hay now is with the fact that the Secret Service obviously fucked this up big time.
Yeah, how do they
Um,
do that? I mean, it seems like a glaring fuck up. Here you got higher ground within 130 yards of Donald Trump, well in the range of an AR-15. If they had somebody who was a professional, Donald Trump would be dead now. They wouldn't have missed
yeah.
that shot.
Well, and he was wandering around with a rangefinder. They
Yeah,
knew that. The
yeah.
authorities knew
I've
that.
seen video of it.
Yeah.
Prior to the
So
event, you see him walking around by that place, and there he is. You know it's him because you can kind of see his
yeah.
profile. Nobody fucking thought a thing. And why is that? Was he? If we go back to the idea that it was staged, and we know that Secret Service or somebody was looking, saw him in their sights, had him in his sights for 2 minutes, and was told not to shoot. Why would that be?
Well, I'm not sure that that's actually been validated. I've heard that's
That could
fake.
be. Okay.
But certainly people in the audience saw him. They told authorities about it. They told the police. I don't know if it got to the Secret Service or not, but there's a guy on the roof with a gun. That should be kind of an automatic get the candidate off the stage, don't you think?
I,
Don't let him
I,
get on the stage.
I would think so. Yeah. You get him off the stage as quickly as possible. And that's the other thing. He gets hit. He doesn't fall down. He goes down. The Secret Service cover him up, and they say they got the shooter, but who knows if there isn't a second shooter. They stand him up
Right.
wide open to everybody. He raises his fist, and they dick around it takes them like 2 minutes to get to the car that's 50 feet away. That
Yeah.
that candidate should have been in a car within 10 seconds, covered
Well,
up completely the whole time.
go back and look at video of Ford both times.
Oh,
Reagan,
Reagan, yeah.
you don't see him after the shots.
No,
You
no.
know, they are covered up. They're gotten to safety. And I don't care who Trump is. If you're doing your job as a Secret Service, you call it, not him.
Right,
You hear him saying, "Let me get my shoes." They're going to say, "Fuck your shoes. Let's go."
right.
They're carrying you off the stage. There's something going on there. And the Republicans are going to try to make it, well, it was a Democratic fix. There's somebody in the Secret Service. They're calling for the head of the woman who runs it, and so forth. And whether it was on purpose or incompetence, you got to say this was totally messed up.
But here's another factor we've got to roll into this thing that goes back a ways and maybe people aren't talking about. The Secret Service has its problems because
Yeah,
remember, we found out they were complicit in January 6th, and
right.
they had something to hide because they had all these
Yeah,
text messages that, whoops, we erased them by accident.
yeah,
You have to wonder what's going on in the Secret Service. And if they did want to stage this thing, and we know the Secret Service is already complicit with Donald Trump, that
yeah,
adds some more questions.
yep.
It-
And this is the thing: who appointed the current director? Is she a holdover? Did Biden appoint her? I don't know.
and if there is a problem with the Secret Service, are we at risk with our sitting president, who is also guarded by Secret Service?
I'd be asking that question. I certainly would. I would have asked that question going in
Yeah,
after we know that they were complicit in January 16th and erase those text messages. We know.
yeah.
We don't need to
So,
see them. The fact of the erasure is proof enough for me that they were involved, or at least some of them. I don't know who. Perhaps his personal contingent or whatever. I don't know. But knowing Trump surrounds himself with loyalists, you know that he would have picked and choose loyalists to be on his Secret Service detachment for
right,
sure.
right.
And quite frankly, I was in military intelligence, and most of them tend to be quite. Their lifers tend to be pretty conservative. Um, in the CIA, in the NSA, in the Secret Service, all of those, they tend to run conservative. So it would not be surprising if many people considered that the Secret Service was complicit when Kennedy was killed,
Right,
and possibly with RFK too.
right. Well, the other thing, we're going to have to wrap things up here pretty quick, but the other thing about the Secret Service this is interesting. This is a story that prior to the assassination attempt, there apparently was a credible threat against Donald
Yeah,
Trump
from Iran.
from Iran. And
Yeah,
people say, why is Iran hate him? Well, he pulled out of that nuclear thing, and some higher up in Iran got killed under Donald Trump's watch, so they want him dead. I remember them coming out and saying, we got a contract on that motherfucker. Well, there was a
yeah.
credible threat, and they went to the Secret Service and said, hey, you got a threat, you got to beef things up. So this happened after they beefed up what they normally have, and they still failed miserably. That's gotta call for an investigation. That's gotta call for questions. The question is, will we ever find out what really happened? Because I don't think we know what really happened.
Well, what the Secret Service says is that they were shorthanded because of the NATO meeting.
But you were told
So
to
that,
beef up because there's a threat
yeah,
against Trump.
but because they were shorthanded protecting all these foreign dignitaries and so forth, they had to delegate securing the site outside the immediate site to the local authority, state and local authorities, and that's where the fall down was. But that doesn't ring true to me.
No, I mean, if your job is to protect the president or a former president, and you just don't have enough people, and that leaves some holes, you're not protecting them at all. Because if
No,
anybody has any wits about them, they'll find those fucking holes and they'll
yeah,
do what they want to do. That's a poor excuse. That's not an excuse.
yeah. It seems crazy to me that a kid can scope out the thing the day before. He can show up with a rangefinder. He can go to a building with a ladder, climb up on the building, and lay there with a gun for how long? I forget. I know it's a very long time.
While people are
Um,
pointing them out.
right. While people are pointing him out, and in theory, that sniper who took him out after he fired a couple of shots already knows where he is and is sighted in.
Yeah. It all seems very, very strange. And if it were anybody but Donald Trump, we wouldn't probably think twice about it. But we know
No,
to the extent Donald Trump will go to benefit him. Well, Ed, I know you got shit to do. We put our time in and we talked about what we talked about. I appreciate you coming by and spending the time. Thank you very much.
you bet. Always glad to. Remind folks that you can find me at Holler Troll on TikTok. I got a couple of new things up there.
Absolutely. I recommend that you check out Holler Troll, HOLLERTROLL. Check it out. Ed doesn't always talk about politics, or at least about politics in the way you hear him talk about it here, but it's always very interesting, entertaining, and educational. That's the one thing I can say about you. You are educational. You're an educational motherfucker.
That's on my degree.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Oh, I got to tell you a degree I got. I talked about this on the podcast before we go.
Mm,
My son's getting married. My oldest son's getting married
right.
to a lovely young woman. And it's going to be simple. It's going to be just family. And there's some place out by us that's on the lake. And
That's because you have to pay for it, right? No, I'm kidding.
well, we didn't have to pay for it. We ended up paying for it because that's what, it
Yeah,
was going to
that's
be
what you
really
do.
small at a courthouse. And my wife said, nah, we can give you some money to do it. And I'm fine with that. But my son says to me, and this really took me by surprise. He says to me, yeah, maybe you can be the officiant. I
There
go,
you go.
me? Me? Why would I be that sounds like the dumbest choice since Donald Trump picked fucking JD Vance. So anyway, I went through the whole process. I went online, spent my $70. I'm now ordained. I'm waiting for the paperwork. Then I got to sign in with the county and I'm going to be the officiant. He says, don't you think you can do it? I go, it's about talking in front of people. I got that. I just don't understand why me. And I think it was because initially he thought he'd save some money, but I'm going to
There
charge
you
that
go.
motherfucker $500 if he likes it or not.
Well, could you use a little pull and get me into heaven? I don't think I'm gonna
Oh,
make it on my own.
yeah, yeah. On the next Zoom meeting I have with Jesus, which
Yeah.
I do that on Wednesdays actually. Now I'm being sacrilegious. Anyway, no. So I'm now ordained. I don't have the documentation yet, but it's coming, and I'm going to
All
have it
right.
right behind me every time I do just so the evangelicals shit themselves.
So you're gonna be asking for money now?
No, no, I'm not asking for money. Anyway, Ed, thank you very much. And we'll talk to you again next week. Those listening, I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.